Michelle Grantham, and I'm here to give you an informative speech on child abuse and its causes. Child abuse is a multi-faceted problem, and there's numerous causes that cannot be narrowed to just one cause. There's no reason for just one child abuse. In 1996, it was estimated that more than 3 million children were victims of child abuse or neglect. Understanding the causes is crucial to addressing the problem of child abuse, and the main idea of the speech will revolve around family environment, social causes, and parental profiling as causes for child abuse. At the conclusion, I feel that you will understand the different causes for child abuse and hopefully can understand and monitor those reasons and help stop child abuse. Family environment, the risk factors in the family included, but remember these are not limited to abusive and high-risk parents that often have alcohol and drug problems. Jacqueline Campbell wrote a book on assessing dangerous families, and that's based on the battering patterns. And typically such a family has less income compared to a conventional nuclear family, which is a mom and a dad. And also the amount of stressors experienced by family members increase the risk for child abuse. Stressors can include verbal and physical conflict within the family members, as well as lack of family unity and expressiveness. Again, Jacqueline Campbell goes into detail in her book with all the different family environment and risk factors. Consequently, the lack of sufficient funds, economic and social support may also create a condition that encourages abuse. For instance, the parent may take out his or her frustration on the child. Unknowingly, they're not doing it, they just kind of blow up. They may persist if nothing is done to salvage the situation. If a parent doesn't realize they're taking their stressors out on the child, these are going to continue. As the increase of unconventional families is on the rise, so is child abuse. Children that are in households with unrelated parents seem to have a higher risk of child abuse than children with the same parents. Some examples, for example, one was written in the San Francisco Chronicle in April of 2009. 3 children were beaten and confined to a backyard for 2 years by their aunt and grandmother. This is an unconventional family, and the abuse of these children was nothing more than horrendous. The children's grandmother and aunt made the children live in humane conditions in the yard and were fed as little as once a week. They had to use a water hose to bathe with, and they had to sleep outside in tents as well. Approximately 70% of deaths are caused by the child's father, followed by non-biological males as the most common perpetrators. On November 4th, 1987, Lisa Steinberg, a child, was killed by an adoptive father, Joel Steinberg, while the girlfriend stood and watched. On December 8, 2001, a 14-month-old boy was killed by his mother's boyfriend by violently shaking the child. Yet, again on December 19th, 2001, another child was killed by a boyfriend while a mother stood by. So you can tell the family environment is a main cause for child abuse. These are just a few examples of the unrelated parents that cause child abuse to children. Another cause for child abuse is social causes. I don't feel people are born violent. However, so many different social causes can make an individual engage in horrific and destructive behavior. Studies have been conducted by psychologists and criminologists on what causes violence, and income is one factor. Elizabeth Engler wrote Understanding Violence, and she stresses the importance of the economic factor. Other causes for the types of behavior include life choices as well as external factors. Social class and poverty levels are common factors associated with violence. Again, Elizabeth Engler, in her 2003 book of Understanding Violence, goes into more detail about the social class and violence being part of that cause. According to research conducted by the National Incidence Research, children who come from homes that earn less than $15,000 annually are more likely to undergo some form of abuse. According to a website called Causes for Child Abuse, in 2008, Zentatics listed that 15,000 annual income can be a factor, a social factor for child abuse. Also, in 1992, Elizabeth Engler conducted a study, and she included education levels of men, and that they actually have an impact on their tendency to become violent. Different cultures value education differently. Such of those are more remote, rural religions, and how these cultures show a strong social control on violence, where it's expected, so they don't form it as a form of child abuse. What constitutes child abuse is going to vary across cultures. For instance, African Americans are inclined to use punishment, which may be construed as abuse in the United States. Yet, this is considered the norm in their culture. Lastly, institutionalized abuse causes child abuse. Sometimes institutionalized norms or practices create an environment in which abuse thrives. For example, social and cultural norms that promote the institutionalized, the practice in specific parts of the world, while the same is considered a barbaric type of child abuse. In other words, where in the United States, a child abuse is looked at totally different than other cultures around the world, and as those cultures move into the United States, they bring those with them, and the children are abused more often, and because of the social factors and the religions, it's hard for people to determine that as child abuse. Lastly, another cause for child abuse is just the parental profile, the parents themselves. As the parents' ages are becoming younger, it's a crucial factor, especially when the parents are teenagers. They're more likely to abuse the child since they're not completely developed adults themselves. Poor parenting skills, they haven't matured enough to understand those skills. Young parents and low education levels are high risk factors under the parent profile, and this was also listed in the Journal of Psychology, American Psychology Association. Magden Stonemeyer did a study on education levels and the risk factors on child abuse. Young parents are going to lack the experience of appropriate social relationships. They can cause unstable relationships. They haven't matured to the level to understand a stable relationship. In addition, they're not sufficiently equipped to respond to the child's needs since their needs haven't been fulfilled as a child. History of abuse becomes a cycle in itself, which ultimately becomes the norm. A child was abused as a child, so they're going to abuse their child because they feel that that's a norm. This is especially for parents who fail to develop coping skills and strategies. The so-called at-risk children, they can consist of healthy infants from unexpected pregnancies or a complicated pregnancy or complicated delivery. Kimberly McCabe wrote a book on child abuse in the criminal justice system, and those were some of the risk factors for at-risk children that she pointed out. Parents of children born with mental or physical handicaps are more prone to suffering child abuse. She also mentioned this, Kimberly McNabe, in her book as well. If we can profile parents that are shown to be more prone to child abuse, we can provide help to those parents before the abuse starts to let them know that's not the norm. Risk indicators can be an assessment for tools for physicians, social workers, and educators. Jeff Fowler wrote a book, and it's a practitioner's tool for child protection, and in 2003 with guidelines to help physicians to pay attention to those risk factors. In conclusion, I'd just like to reinstate the first main point of family environment, such as child rearing practices. Domestic violence and single parents are crucial in increasing the likelihood of child abuse, similar to the second main point. Social economic causes such as income level, different cultural values, and institutionalized abuse manifestations. Parental profile, the last main point, should also not